Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Golden Astrologer Podcast. This is Deb McBride, and I am with you from lovely Escazú, Costa Rica on March 15th, a Sunday in the year 2026. And we have a lot going on this week, and I hope that it settles everything from the last month and a half. But let's start with right now, which is this morning at 4:08 a.m. Eastern Time, the Mars-Mercury conjunction happened. And they happened at the North Node, very close to the North Node. As you know, Mercury has been very close to the North Node as it's starting to slow down. It's at 9 degrees. They met at 9 degrees, and the North Node is 8 degrees. And so what's happening here is that there's I felt an inflammation of energy. And even though it's in the nice sign of Pisces, I would have to say that this is still inflammatory. And I definitely felt the inflammation from this. Okay, so if you have been feeling something chaotic, inflamed, you are not alone. And for some people, it's just been fine or whatever. But I think that it felt like a lot of busyness. It felt like a lot of stuff ever since Mars hit that North Node on, it was Friday afternoon here where I live. And it was like the exact moment. And all sorts of pandemonium erupted in my life while Mars was coming to that North Node. Now, for me, I have planets there. I have Uranus opposite that. I have Venus. I have the moon. And so it really felt like something kind of exploded. And I was very calm all morning Friday. I was sitting here. I was doing my work. I did my wonderful meditation. I was on the patio doing work. And then all of a sudden, things started getting crazy. Like, I was on the phone with an accountant, and she and I kept playing phone tag, like I couldn't get through to her, and then she was calling me back, and I was calling her at the same time, or I was on the phone with somebody else, and it's back and forth. And when I was on the phone with her at one point, she said, "Oh my God." And I thought, what I just told her wrong? What happened? Her computer was starting to shut down for an upgrade. I'm sure she's in Windows. I'm in a Mac. And she's saying, "Oh my God, she didn't finish the tax return and save it that she was working on, and the computer just does this," which mine does not do. Just thought I'd throw that in there. And and so she was like, oh my God, and let me call you back. I'm like, okay. So in the meantime, my neighbor friend calls me and says, "I have a hummingbird stuck in my house." So this is like two worlds, right? I'm talking to an accountant in New York, and then I'm talking to my neighbor next door, and a hummingbird has come in her house. And so while I'm waiting for the accountant to call me back, I go back to help my neighbor, and we're trying to get this cute little hummingbird who's flying all the way up where we can't reach it, up into the rafters there. And I'm like, I've got a water bottle. I'm squirting a little water. It's like splashing. Boy, they like water, but it settled on a ledge near her upper window, and she couldn't get to it. And the hummingbird slept over that night. So it was just crazy. And then my internet went down for a bit, and then I was like back and forth with people. The phone, it was just nuts. And then I calmed down Friday night, but first thing Saturday morning, I'm standing in my dining room, and there is a very large possum sitting in my garden right near my dining room window. Okay, it had knocked over one of my new orchids, and it was going into this crawl space that's beneath the dining room window outside in the garden. And it was going in there, and I'm like, oh no, you don't. You are not going to like make a nest in there. And I don't even know what it's for. It's probably, it has pipes around it that seem to be defunct, and maybe it was something to do with the water system here. But there's just like a piece of rotting wood on top of it. So so the possum like kind of came out of that and like walked through my garden, and I got the guard who was actually right near my house, my gate, because he was investigating a cats screaming at each other. He's trying to find my landlady's cats. And I asked him I told him what happened. He came in and my broken Spanish, and he lifted up the piece of wood and he says, no. And thankfully there were no babies in there. So I went and showed my landlady, who was outside wondering what cats were screaming at each other. So you could see this was pandemonium. And I showed her what was going on. She goes, oh yes, the zarigüeya. That's possum in Spanish, zarigüeya. So zarigüeyas come to her all the time, she tells me. Yeah, because she's feeding them. And that's why they're in my garden. So they shouldn't be in my garden. They shouldn't be hanging out there looking for places to nest. So I said, I need some old tiles. And I saw a few, and I grabbed them, and I piled them up on that wood and in that corner on this old space where the water system might have been at one point, so that nobody can lift that up. No zarigüeya. So then my friend next door says, Alejandro's coming to help me get the hummingbird out of my house. I'm like, it's still there. Hummingbird is colibri. So he comes in, and what we were doing before, actually right before that, then I went back over to help her. The hummingbird had flown onto the floor and was just laying there, probably because it had no nutrients. And she had put out a little sugar water dish the night before for it, and it never went to it, and the ants got to it. So I said, make another dish. It was laying on the floor. I took the sugar water and I spilled it on its beak onto the little area rug where it was laying. And then it started to suck it up, and it started to sip all of the sugar water that was on the carpet. You can see this is pandemonium, right? This is all crazy Mars, Mercury, North Node. And she's standing there with me, and the bird sat up. So I'm giving it sugar water, and now it's sitting up. Now it's getting excited, and then Alejandro arrives, and he goes to pick it up, and it flew off. And now she's like, oh no, it's going to be where we can't reach it. He caught it and let it go outside, and it was like, Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Too much madness. Too much madness. And then the afternoon was a little nutty. And then this morning when the Mars Mercury happened, I felt it last night into the night, and just sort of triggered by the whole thing and inflamed. So pandemonium, inflammation. This is the way my little life was. But remember also, I have planets right. I have a T-square that's sitting right on that Mars-Mercury conjunction in the North Node on my Venus, and opposing Uranus and Pluto, and squaring my moon. So for me, this was a kind of pandemonium around the home, around friends, around the zarigüeyas, the colibris, life in the jungle. Saving a hummingbird with sugar water. It was really over the top. So maybe yours was different. Maybe it wasn't so inflamed. Maybe you weren't so feeling like you were out of control and there were too many things going on simultaneously. Yeah, so that was something. So we have a few more days of eclipse energy. And on Wednesday, the 18th, the new moon will kick out the eclipse period. Now, this is at 28 degrees Pisces, and that occurs at 9:23 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be 7:23 my time, and then the moon goes void, right? And then a few hours later, it will go into Aries. The moon will go into Aries, and then it will move on, but that 28 degree Pisces new moon is finishing up the eclipse period. So we have tomorrow, the rest of today, we have tomorrow, and then we have Tuesday, and then Wednesday, and then Wednesday evening it's gone in my region of the world. This is really something we are happy to release, okay? And I just feel that the eclipses and the Saturn Neptune are highly inflammatory, and just accompanying all of this with the Mercury retrograde and the Mars on the North Node and everything at the same time, I really felt like, we're still in all of this. We are still wading through the muck and mire of the eclipse season. And eclipses, like I always say, brings an emotional tide forward into the atmosphere and into our lives, into the collective. And so we're still processing a lot of these world events that have been going on for weeks that are very disturbing. And we are also really working through the last week of Mercury retrograde. Now, Mercury will go direct on Friday the 20th, but it's only Sunday, so we still have these next days. But I feel like now that it's met with Mars in Pisces, we're moving past the nodes and things, and no more triggering of eclipse energies and stuff, right? It is going to meet, Mercury will meet with Mars again, but it will be in Aries, and it will be on April 20th. And they will pass over Saturn, because Saturn's going to be very close. Saturn will be at 7 degrees, and then they're going to meet at 8. So they're going to be with Saturn. So that's going to be another whole thing, but let's cross that bridge when we come to it. We have 5 more weeks before that. As I said, Mercury is going direct on Friday afternoon, 3:33 p.m. Eastern Time. That'll be 1:33 my time. And also, we're going to be moving forward. It will be at 8 degrees Pisces with the North Node for a week. So like I said last week, if you heard me, the 17th, this Tuesday, the day after tomorrow, Mercury will arrive at 8 degrees and hang out on that North Node till the 24th. So it's going to be this whole week of Mercury sitting at 8 degrees with the North Node. Now that could be really fruitful. That could be something very, inspiring, thoughtful. Mars will be past it. Mars is moving on. So it's not going to be this thing again, because Mars is moving forward and Mercury is still right now moving backward. And we have a chance to connect to something very fulfilling. It's the North Node. It's Pisces. It's inspiration. And yesterday, despite the chaos, once the chaos calmed down a bit yesterday morning, I felt very tapped into spirit and very tapped into energies that were positive. So I'm really looking forward to being inspired and creative with this Mercury on the North Node, and hopefully it will give us some insight into our own levels of fulfillment and what could be creative for us at this point. So, it could be really useful for this Mercury, and insight and self-awareness, with Mercury on the North Node in Pisces. This could be really, really good. So I believe it should be positive, even though Mercury is still retrograde for a few days and spending half of the time retrograde, half of the time direct on that degree. And then Mercury will move on to 9 degrees, etc. But I really feel like Mercury can give us an opportunity to see something here, to use our self-awareness to gain knowledge about ourselves and what could be very fulfilling for us, or a fulfilling idea or thoughts and stuff in communication. So I think this could be really very good. So happy about that. Okay, so that's where Mercury is. And, we're going to have the sun and the moon both going into Aries. So, I said Wednesday there's the new moon in Pisces, then the moon goes into Aries after it goes out of void, and it will then on Thursday cross over Neptune at 3 a.m. and then Saturn at 6:51 a.m. So again, now I remember the last time this happened, right before the Saturn-Neptune conjunction a month ago. 28 days before this, the moon was in Aries passing over Saturn and Neptune, and then Saturn and Neptune met in conjunction. Now they're separating slightly, and the moon is going to move over them again. I'm very curious how this is going to feel, because I felt that was very strong when it hit the Saturn-Neptune. It was emotionally really tough. And I just want to send out a little bit of a cautionary word because it might feel tough again, even though we're past the eclipse. So now it will be hours later, we'll be past the eclipses, and we won't feel that eclipse energy anymore, but it's still tied into the Neptune and the Saturn. So hopefully it will be a very good process and move on, and it will be a release rather than more of the stew. Because I think that since that was right in the middle of the two eclipses, it felt very soupy, stewy, mucky, muddy. Okay. And I don't think it felt great, and it because Saturn and Neptune were really about to conjunct. Now that's over. The tension, the buildup was gone, but that was between eclipses. So the buildup of the eclipses is going to be gone. So I'm really hoping, and you'll hear from me next Sunday, what I experience. I hope what I experience is not this muddiness that we had last time, and I hope everybody gets a good night's sleep if it's nighttime in your region of the world. I really hope I get a good night's sleep because the last 2 nights I have not slept well. So due to all the circumstances and the pandemonium that I just described, the energies were just too much. On Wednesday, also the day of the new moon, we have a nice Venus square Jupiter. So Venus in Aries will square Jupiter. And that will be something, Venus and Jupiter are, even though they're squaring, they'll be in a good awareness promoting aspect. It's a square, but it will bring something to our attention, or hopefully we won't be terribly overindulgent. We'll get, a wide open view to something because that's what Jupiter does. And in our relationships, our friendships. So that's at 12:09 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday the 18th. So that could be very positive. Venus and Jupiter are generally positive together, but watch your overindulgence, whether it's at lunch that day or spending or whatever you're doing. So just be careful. And then Friday is the equinox. It is the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere and the autumn equinox in the southern hemisphere, and the sun enters Aries. And that is at 10:46 a.m. Eastern Time on Friday the 20th. So we've just had the moon move over the Neptune and the Saturn on Thursday in the wee hours, and then Friday we're going to have the sun enter Aries and then eventually move over Saturn and Neptune. So first is going to be Neptune on Sunday the 22nd, and that'll be at 7:18 a.m. on Sunday the 22nd in Eastern Time, and then it'll take till Wednesday the 25th of the following week, so a week and a half from now, for the sun to meet Saturn in Aries. And so between Sunday the 22nd and Wednesday the 25th, the sun is going to be in between Neptune and Saturn. And so that might be a little complicated. That might be feeling a little bit stuck, or some issues may come forward, but that's next Sunday, and we'll talk about that more next Sunday on the podcast. And, just be very aware of this. Just be very aware of, these movements, and that the Saturn and the Neptune are still close enough together for things to really trigger it. And we're going to have this for a little while, because remember what I said the other day, last week, that Mercury is going to trigger, and then Mars will be the last one to trigger that Aries point. So let's just take one step at a time, and remember that the moon's going to trigger it on Thursday, and then the sun is going to start moving in there next Sunday. In between, we're going to have a very nice Jupiter-Mars relationship, with Mars trining Jupiter, and that's on Saturday the 21st at 8:01 p.m. Eastern Time. Mars will be in Pisces, Jupiter will be in Cancer, and this is a very strong dynamic in water signs with Mars and Jupiter, and they're upbeat planets. They're planets that rule fire signs, so they want action and energy. So maybe you'll get a lot done on Saturday. Maybe you'll be really upbeat on Saturday. Maybe you'll have lots of energy to exercise or do some fun stuff. That could be a really fun aspect. And it is a trine, so it's very smooth and flowing, and it's in water, so it could be times when you want to connect with your loved ones and people at home, or just do things in the house that give you joy and give you a feeling of, maybe some accomplishment. But Mars and Jupiter are very high energy together, and it's a trine, it's not a conjunction, but this is something we want to pay attention to because, it is a lot of energy, and it is useful energy. So if you have like plans for next Saturday or something, this might be something good that you want to pay attention to, that you can use in a very productive way, right? So this is important. And, I think this is an important week ahead. I think this is the last hurrah because we're moving out of eclipses and we're moving out of Mercury retrograde. Yay. And we're moving out of Pisces. We're getting the sun moving out of Pisces. So Pisces season is coming to an end for the next year. And this is the last few days of Pisces season before the sun enters Aries. Now, as the sun goes into Aries, it is going to now stop over at that famous point. Even though Saturn and Neptune aren't at 0 degrees anymore, and Neptune is still fairly very early, like a degree, the sun is going to trigger that, which is now a famous point. This is the famous point of Saturn and Neptune in Aries, 0 degrees Aries. And so the sun will touch that. So all of this stuff we've been contending with, both personally and in the world, and how that's going to play out in our lives, all of that is really going to be touched by the sun. And the sun heals, right? The sun heals. The sun is a healing influence, not the moon that comes over it and gives us some, emotional reaction to what we've been living with and what we're feeling. So be very aware of the difference, the feeling that you might feel, maybe Thursday sometime in the day, because they'll be lingering. And then Friday is very different. Friday's going to be very different. It's the sun moving over the spot, and it's not going to be so heated. And when the sun gets there, things heal. So we like when the sun comes over, where there's just been something very intense. That does mean that there's the possibility that more information regarding those two planets and where they've traveled and how the world reacted to that, which we have seen in these last weeks, we want to pay attention to how the sun sort of smooths it over, or maybe squeezes out the last bits of the conflicts that arrived for us back on February 20th. Okay, so when this happens, we want to stay very keenly aware of how things are moving and how things feel when the sun makes a difference. This works for your progressions too. When your progressed sun comes over planets, it heals the situation regarding those planets. If it goes over your natal planets and you have like a configuration there and the sun moves over that progressed sun, which moves very slowly, it could really be a balm for your old patterns and your old histories of what those planets represent in your life. So this is something to pay attention to as far as like your own progressions are concerned. But the sun does heal. It's the force of life. It is the energy that warms us, warms our hearts, warms our beings. And it is a very healing energy. Even if you were to, there are times when I haven't felt well and I went out in the sun and just sort of sat on a park bench in the sun. And that made me feel so much better. Just my physical body receiving the sun. It may not have been summer, it may have been a different time of year, but it does give us that healing warmth That's why things grow. That's why we can't live without it, So the sun is very important. And so when it enters Aries, it starts the Aries season, it starts the equinox, it is the cardinal axis, but maybe it will be that balm we all need as far as what was going on for ourselves in February when Saturn and Neptune joined each other, and then the subsequent weeks that we've been seeing things happening in the world. Perhaps there'll be some peace to this, and then there'll be some healing, or it can also, whenever you're healing, sometimes something like the sun could bring out the last vestiges of what needs to be healed. Like it's like taking care of yourself and when you're sick, and then the last energies of being sick finally leave. So it could be something like that. But it's going to be very interesting nonetheless, because Mercury's going direct that day, and I expect that to be a big turnaround. And this is an important time. Friday's an important day because of the sun going into Aries, because it's going to touch that spot where Saturn and Neptune are or were, and because Mercury's going direct, and then the sun will reach Neptune on Sunday morning. And Sun Neptune is usually a very intuitive, eye-opening aspect. And now we're going to have it in Aries, so this is going to be some very interesting dynamics that we're going to watch come forward, and some reveals. So there may be some reveals this week. Reveals due to the new moon ending the eclipse period, the sun entering Aries, Mercury going direct, sun going over Neptune, and then eventually over Saturn. I'm more concerned about the immediacy of the eclipses ending and Mercury going direct than I am about sun passing over Saturn the following week. But let's get there, and then I can assess what's happening and how I'm feeling. Because how I'm feeling, and I feel all these things all the time, always. I have to bring that information to you. So a lot of this, I transmit my podcast. I'm not sitting here with a script. It's all transmission. It's all being channeled through me. And I also, take time to process what I've been experiencing. And that's why I can say to you, this Mercury, Mars has been inflammatory, today, yesterday, a bit, the North Node, I expected Mars North Node to be something more insightful, and I definitely had insights, but I didn't expect the level of chaos that I got. And I think that had a lot to do with Mercury retrograde, and that's always chaotic, but we can look forward. This is the last days. These are the last days of Mercury retrograde and the last moments of eclipse season. It's over as of Wednesday. So hurrah. Let's see what happens. Let's see what's revealed to us. Let's see what comes up in our own lives and how we want to handle this and heal from everything, because I feel like this has not been a healing time. I feel like this has been a very complicated and difficult time. I expected that. I was kind of dreading these weeks. I'm glad they're coming to an end. I hope they don't end with a bang. I hope they just sort of fizzle out and go their own way. Like I said, maybe there's some reveals in the world, but hopefully for each of us individually, this is something that we can just breathe a big sigh of relief and just let go and just release everything that we've been contending with in these weeks. So on that note, if you want more information, you can certainly sit with me in a session and we can discuss your chart and how the eclipses have been affecting you and how this Saturn Neptune has been showing up in your life, and how does it feel now that it's all coming to an end, and what did you learn and what did you experience. And really, I want to congratulate everybody for getting through this. But if you are interested in seeing what that looks like and identifying the events that you've had happen, then certainly sit with me in a session. You can go to my website, thegoldenastrologer.com, and click book now, book online, and it will take you to the page where you can book an astrology session. Or maybe you need a Reiki session after all of this, and just sort of a nice clearing out of all this energy that has been way too much for everybody. And certainly you can join me in expansion mentoring. Maybe some new ideas have arisen for you, and we can do 3 months, 6 months, 12 months together, and we can work on whatever projects you would like to see evolve in your work, in your life. Astrology sessions are always really insightful, and one-to-one astrology sessions are nothing to shy away from. They're not going to be negative energy. I'm not going to tell you bad things. I'm going to help you understand where this energy is pointing you, and we can get some clarity and insight to where it can take you. So just be aware of that. It's not something to shy away from or be afraid of. Sitting in a one-to-one session is a really good thing to do. And certainly if you've never had astrology sessions before, it could be a lot of fun for you. So don't be nervous. Don't be shy. Come join me in session, and it will be interesting and even a lot of fun. Thank you so much for listening. Blessings to you in this week ahead. Yes, it's all coming to a close. We're really happy about that. I thank you so much. Much gratitude to each and every one of you in my life for listening, for joining me, and may you have a peaceful, blessed, grateful week. Thanks. See you on the internet.